My name is Molly Morse Limmer. I'm the Deputy Chairman of Freeman's Hindman, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to the kickoff of this incredible sale that we have, Lincoln's Legacy. And I hope you had some time to look at the pieces that we have downstairs. The sale will encompass 144 items from the life of our 16th president. I'd like to introduce the incredible people that we have on our panel this evening. We are delighted and honored that Harold Holzer has agreed to join us for this event. I'm going to share his whole bio because okay. For those who don't know, he has written extensively on the 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, several books, and you will see some lingering around that we have for you to take if you'd like. So if you see the pile of books, not only are you welcome to take one, but I invite you to ask Dr. Holzer to sign one for you if you dare. I will just say briefly, if you will let me. He's currently the director of the Roosevelt House Public Policy Institute at Hunter College. I'm going to skip down. He's been awarded the National Humanities Medal by George W. Bush, president. He's the author, co-author, or editor of, and this might be my eyes failing, but I do believe this number is correct, 55 books on Lincoln, the Civil War, and the history of American media. So, wow. His Lincoln and Power of the Press won a 2013 Gilder Lehrman Lincoln Prize and the Mark Linton History Prize from Columbia University School of Journalism and the Goldschmidt Prize from Harvard's Kennedy School, among other honors. We are honored and delighted to have you here, and I won't embarrass you further by reading more of the bio.
A little more. No. Well, that's...
His latest book, available on Amazon, as we know, Brought Forth on This Continent, Abraham Lincoln and American Immigration from 2024, is out. And we will also say he was a historical consultant for the Steven Spielberg film Lincon. And we welcome his wife Edith as well to join us this evening. Little shout out. To my left, I have an esteemed colleague, Dr. C. Wesley Cowan. Wes Cowan, as we know him. I've been at Hindman, now Freeman's Hindman, for close to 5 years and been privileged to work with Wes. Wes founded the firm Cowan's Auctions, and I'll read a little bit of his bio. He holds a BA and MA in anthropology from University of Kentucky and a PhD in anthropology from the University of Michigan. After a career in academia and museum curation, Wes founded Cowan's Auctions in 1995, focusing on historical Americana, which evolved into one of the largest full-service fine art auction houses in the Midwest. We merged with Cowan's. Hindman merged with Cowan's in 2018 to form Hindman Auctions. So everyone knows that is why we are lucky to have him amongst us. During the time Wes was at the helm, Cowan sold many important items related to Lincoln, including Lincoln's 1860 letter introducing himself to Hannibal Hamlin, his vice presidential running mate, the arrest and commitment papers of Mary Lincoln's to Bellevue Place in Illinois in 1875, a large group of Lincoln family artifacts from Hildene, the New Hampshire, Vermont residence of Robert Todd Lincoln. See, I'm not even a Lincoln historian, and I know that much at this point from...
Alex said, Sting had big Lincoln scholars, and I said, no, there's only one Lincoln scholar here. I'm just an engineer.
Wes, you may recognize Wes from, I believe, 29 years on the Antiques Roadshow, and also 11 years as host of the popular PBS series History Detectives. And so I'm delighted to have you next to me. And last, on our left, Tim Long, also a part of the Freeman's Hindman team, is our Vice President of Museum Services, where he assists museums, libraries, and universities with acquisitions, deaccessions, collection assessment, and appraisals. However, Timothy's career in museums has spanned over 2 decades, with curatorial experience in the United States and the United Kingdom, serving as a curator at institutions such as the Museum of London, the San Diego History Center, and Chicago's History Museum, where he managed a collection of rare presidential artifacts, including an important collection of Abraham Lincoln items associated with his life and assassination. Timothy is also the author of several publications, including a monograph published through the V&A Publishing and an article in the British Museum Technical Research Bulletin. His study of presidential history has continued, and he's currently a presidential scholar of George Washington, recently completing a fellowship at the George Washington Presidential Library at Mount Vernon. And he works for us. How lucky are we? Tim also is an expert in historical costume, and so that is how he first joined us at Freeman's Hindman, and he is now in this incredible role working with our museum teams. So you don't need to hear much more from me, but I do want to say one thing, which is I'm especially proud in this moment, and I'm so honored to be standing with these esteemed colleagues before me, because I believe strongly in our scholarship as an auction house. It's part of what I was brought in to do, was really lift and keep what Wes had brought to his team, this concept of pulling the thread through everything that we look at, that every single work of art and object that we sell in our auction house has been studied and restudied and deciphered and discussed by an entire team of scholars. And to have this group of scholars sitting with me in the front tonight is really a meaningful moment for our auction house. With no further ado, you don't need to hear from me anymore. You are all esteemed scholars in my book on the 16th president, coming to this subject from 3 very distinct perspectives. To start, I'd like to know from each of you, what has attracted you personally to Abraham Lincoln as a subject of your passionate study, and what do you consider your angle? And I will call on you if you don't want to start yourself. Okay, Harold, you're first.
Well, I guess is it work? I think it's okay. I guess it started as by accident. I was in a 5th grade class in Queens, and our teacher brought in kind of a sombrero-style hat filled with pieces of paper that contained the names of American heroes. Very few women, by the way. I think it was all men except for Madame Curie. And we were all asked to line up, pick a name literally out of a hat, and identify whom you picked, and then go to the school library, take out a book, and write a composition, as we used to call it 100 years ago. And I picked Lincoln from the hat, and proceeded to the library and found a book by a man who became a friend, Richard Nelson Current, called The Lincoln Nobody Knows. And I didn't know anything, but I was immediately transfixed. It was also the cusp of the Civil War centennial, so I'm really dating myself. And for young people, particularly boys, I will say not in a sexist way, because I also worked for the woman who became famous for wearing hats, Bella Abzug, so I have my feminist creds, but a lot of young boys were interested in the battle recreations that were proposed, so I just was immersed at the age of 11 and 12 in this period and the angle question. So I began corresponding with Lincoln scholars when I was a teenager. One of them, including Richard Current, who lived to 100, and one of them who died just yesterday. His name was Wayne Temple. He was Mr. Encyclopedia about Abraham Lincoln. He was 101 years old and 2 months. He set the record. I think all Lincoln scholars should live to at least 101. And to one of the people to whom I wrote, I was asking advice. How do I get into this field? What do I do? And one fellow named Gerald McMurtry, he was a curator of the Lincoln National Life Foundation in Fort Wayne, said to me, pick something that no one else has written about. And I began to write about prints, engravings, and lithographs of Abraham Lincoln. He let me do a column in the Lincoln Herald when I was 23, 24 years old, regular column on prints. So that was my origin story. That's my angle. And just to say, to see downstairs one of the very few prints that Abraham Lincoln actually signed. He signed lots of photographs, especially small ones, but he never signed any but one engraving made right here in New York by the American Banknote Company, and there is an example of it downstairs. So be still my heart. My study is complete by seeing that piece.
Thank you. Tim, I'm going to kick it to you next.
So my study of Abraham Lincoln started in the summer of 1996. I was an intern at the Chicago History Museum, and at that time, the museum's big exhibition was the exhibition The Last Best Hope of Earth, 1996, 1997. And what populated that exhibition is most or many of the objects that are in this sale. And so I got to not only work with that collection, but at the Chicago History Museum, there's a fairly significant collection of material related to Abraham Lincoln, including his assassination. And so I was very early in my career, but being able to work on projects involving this collection really helped shape the next 30 years of my career. I went on to study other important figures, specifically the clothing that they wore, and through these projects started to apply scientific investigation to better understand the provenance, the history, and in new technologies that continue to be advanced. And so that has led to my current fellowship at George Washington's Presidential Library, where I'm studying his clothing, his surviving clothing, and trying to better understand the provenance. So it's thrilling to be in this space 30 years later, surrounded by the items that helped inspire the last 30 years of my career.
That's incredibly profound. Thank you.
It's fun.
Mine is much more profane and mundane, I think. And when I was writing my dissertation at the University of Michigan, like many graduate students who are writing a dissertation, I was looking for anything that I could use it as an excuse to not write my dissertation. So I'd grown up in Louisville, Kentucky, and my mother was an antique collector. I collected stuff when I was a kid, but I hadn't really been to any antique shops for years. And I thought, there are a lot of antique shops around Ann Arbor, Michigan. Maybe I'll just go out and see what's there. And so I went into an antique shop and saw a box of old photographs, and I picked up a photograph, and I don't even remember what the subject was, but I found myself just suddenly drawn into this picture. And it wasn't a picture of a person, it was a picture of a town or something like that. And I thought, wow, that's really amazing. And I bought it and continued to go to other shops. And one day I was in a shop and there were two guys who were looking at me, wondering, watching what I was doing. And I bought a photograph. They followed me out. One of them said, I'll give you $50 for that picture you just bought that I just paid $1 for. And I said, holy crap, sold. So I, from that point on, I became very interested in 19th century photography. And you can't be interested in 19th century photography without running across pictures of Abraham Lincoln. He sat for 130 photographs. There were others that sat for more, but he took a lot of pictures. When I left academia and started my business in Cincinnati, I was fortunate to have as one of my customers a gentleman named Lloyd Ostendorf, who had written at that time, I guess, Harold, the definitive book on every known photograph of Abraham Lincoln. So whenever I had a Lincoln photograph in an auction, here'd come old, Lloyd Ostendorf in and try to impress me with his knowledge. And so I became and I would not describe myself as a Lincoln scholar in any way, shape, or form, but we sold a lot of Lincoln material. And as Molly indicated, one of the things that I drilled into my employees who were working with this material is that you have to research the material that you're selling. And I was doing that at first, and then that was transferred to my other employees. But that's how I got introduced to Lincoln. And then I continued to read about Lincoln, and I was just telling Harold about one of his recent books that I just I'm fascinated with. So he's a guy that's endlessly inspirational. He is the quintessential American, rose from poverty, didn't have but a year's worth of schooling, and rose to the top of the heap. So what else can I say? He's a great, great man.
Molly, can I just,
Of course.
things that you raised that I just want to comment on briefly. One is that the Chicago History Museum owns the first life painting of Abraham Lincoln. When the painter could not get Lincoln to sit still in the Illinois State House, he asked Lincoln to sit for a little suite of photographs to help him with his sittings. One of those poses is downstairs, signed by Lincoln. I had forgotten that it was part of the collection, so I was thrilled to see that it's just a connection, right, between the great Lincoln collections and collectors. And just let me say one more thing that's not particularly relevant to this proceeding, but the curator at the Chicago History Museum was an American hero named Lonnie Bunch. He is now the secretary of the Smithsonian, and he is under intense fire by people who think that a museum's curatorial imperative should be controlled by the government. So I just want to do a shout out for a great man, Lonnie Bunch.
Thank you for that, Harold.
Can I tag on to him?
Please, you don't even need me at all.
There are very few large photographs of Lincoln that he actually autographed. That photograph is one of the 3 or 4 really that I know of. We sold one years ago, but there has not been one on the market of that size since we sold ours probably 15 years ago. What makes that one really great, and after you get done here, go downstairs and look at it. There's a little blind stamp stamped into the mount that says Hessler Artist, 113 Lake Street, Chicago. And he's the photographer that Harold was just talking about. I have never, ever seen a Hessler blind stamp. That's how rare that blind stamp is. And it's just a great picture.
Thank you. You've all touched on this already, but if I could just circle back for a little slightly different angle. You have all intermingled your careers with Linconiana in different ways. How have you been able to bring Lincoln to life for future generations?
Well, I don't know if I brought him to life, but my books, I hope, create stories that have not been previously addressed, like immigration, Lincoln and the press, and those kinds of things. But Molly has outed me a recovering, you're not supposed to say recovered, recovering Lincoln collector. I have to go to meetings once a week. I have Bill. It was very hard to actually auction off my collection, but Edith and I moved into an apartment in New York City. We gave up our house. It was the right time. We have a grandson going to Harvard. We just found out, so we've got to help with that. But I started with collecting before I wrote anything, and I began writing about the materials finding in, at Renninger's and Ship's Grove and Pennsylvania Dutch country, weekend excursions to find things that people really didn't value or care about. And I built my collection just on personal taste, on whether these images of Lincoln fit into the categories that the silos that I kind of created: campaign prints, great emancipator prints, martyr prints, family prints. And I was able to do both the research, the writing, and the collecting together. That kind of ended one day at a wonderful antique fair that some of you may have been to in Brimfield, Massachusetts. I see some nods. Great place, terrible traffic. And one day I found a print that I did not own. I said, "This is very interesting. What are you asking?" I know you've asked that. The response was discouraging. I said, "Are you joking?" And he said, "No, it's in Holzer's book, page 132. And the Lincoln image. That was the day I sort of gave up acquiring. I still held a collection, but I gave up acquiring. But it was a great run. And if I had a room like this that I could attach to my apartment, I would collect again in a second.
You were not outed by me. You were outed by the New York Times, just so you know.
I had a story about my auction. I must say, it was great. I know.
Tim?
So the projects that I got to work on, I think, really helped advance the analysis of some of Lincoln's material. One was called Wet with Blood at the Chicago History Museum, analyzing the known evidence. The one that I'm really attracted to, though, that I see a lot still, is the photography of a collection of his material. Clothing that was worn by Abraham Lincoln and his wife is a project I really enjoyed working on. So in order to make clothing look good, you can't just throw it on a normal mannequin, especially Mary Todd Lincoln and her figure, which was over, not that way, but she wore a hoop skirt. And so you can't just exhibit clothing quickly, and especially Abraham Lincoln was a very tall man. There aren't mannequins around that can just pop on an Abraham Lincoln coat. And so being able to get so close to his collection and her collection as well, even some of the children's clothing, to be able to create the mounts. So now you see a lot of these photographs in publications, and to know that I helped create those images accurately representing how they looked during his presidency and prior, I think is a point of pride, but help making that available to the public in a way that hadn't been done before.
Quite incredible. Thank you.
You know, sitting here listening to Harold and Tim, I think, God, what the hell am I going to say? I think that I guess I'm probably most proud that we had the great Lincoln material that ended up often in great collections or in great institutional collections. I throughout my career, because I came from an institutional background, I was very keen on trying to make sure that institutions knew about something that at least I thought was important and that they should have in their collections. So I guess that some of the things that I'm proud of that ended up in institutions are for example, the letter that Lincoln wrote to his running mate, Hannibal Hamlin, after the nomination, that Lincoln did not campaign. You didn't campaign in the 19th century the way they do now. So Hamlin was in Maine and Lincoln was in Illinois. And so he writes, and I'm paraphrasing here, something like, "Dear Sir, I think we had the pleasure of meeting when I was in Congress, but I really don't, and I think our prospects are really good and I'll be anxious to meet you." And I thought, man, that is a really significant letter. And it came right from Hannibal Hamlin Jr. Hannibal Hamlin Jr. is a professor at Ohio State in Columbus, and so I went to the house and picked the stuff up, and he handed me this letter, and I said, "What what's happened? And he said, oh, somebody years ago asked the family if we had any signatures of Abraham Lincoln, and they clipped the signature out from the letter. And there was another letter at the same time, and Harold, maybe you've seen this letter. They're both at the Maine Historical Society now. The other letter was written in the heat of the campaign to Hannibal Hamlin, and Lincoln says, "Dear Sir, I understand through my sources that you think that there is a chance we will not carry Maine. This must not happen." And it was like, I can't believe I'm holding this. And it ended up in an institution. And then one other little anecdote, we also sold, as Molly alluded to, the arrest warrant that Robert Todd Lincoln had taken out for his mother to have her committed to they didn't call it an insane asylum then, but it was...
to have her put on trial, I think was the one.
Well, it was, yeah.
It wasn't committed until the trial.
No, but that's right. But this was found in the basement of the home. What's the name of the home?
Bellevue Place.
Bellevue Place. I got a call from I actually got a call from an auctioneer in Louisville, Kentucky. He said, "I have a client who has these important Lincoln things, and I shouldn't sell them. You should sell them." And as it turns out, this woman's parents had bought Bellevue Place, and these papers were in the basement of Bellevue Place. And they ended up in the Filson Historical, or the Louisville Museum.
I saw
where they're preserved now.
So I just was in Louisville 6-7 months ago, and they took me right to see the documents. I think we're responsible for getting them. So 2 comments on what I know I'm going to keep kibitzing here, but Lincoln was kind of disappointed that Hamlin didn't remember him. So they met in Chicago 2 weeks after the election. Lincoln wanted to confer with Hamlin on cabinet selections. And he got specific with Hamlin. He said, "Oh, you may remember we met. You were a senator. I was congressman. We met at the groundbreaking for the Washington Monument." And Hamlin said, "No, I have no recollection." Like that. It was the last time Lincoln conferred with Hamlin on just about anything. That was the wrong answer, by the way. And Tim, I wanted to ask you a question. There are some letters here from Lincoln to Benjamin Brown French, who was the superintendent of public buildings and helped Lincoln figure out a way to pay for Mary Lincoln's redecoration of the White House, which ran way over budget. I reminded everyone here that Benjamin Brown French's nephew was not born until 1865. No, he was born in 1850, so he was already his nephew, was a young man interested in sculpture, Daniel Chester French, who sculpted the Lincoln Memorial. And French wrote in his letters that he was angry that people described Lincoln as slovenly in his dress. He said he researched it and found that he wore, at the end of his presidency, very expensive clothes. He may have worn them casually, but they were really good clothes. And I was wondering if you've ever seen any of that material and whether you could comment on.
There's quite a bit of comments on him being slovenly dressed. I think largely because of his posture. But the garments that survive, even the clippings that exist here, you can see the quality was extremely high. Custom made to fit him, so they fit. They were very well tailored to him, but I think he had a knack or a penchant for not sitting up properly. And so you see that in the dress with a lot of folds across the front of the body.
Thank you all. I do have one more question to ask, but before I get there, I just wanted to do a couple of internal shout-outs. We will be getting the next question to pieces in the auction. So I want to mention the auction again, which is what brings the objects here and what brings us all here. We have an auction of 144 items from the life of Abraham Lincoln on the 21st of May in Chicago. The sale is being sold on behalf of the Lincoln Presidential Foundation. We have with us two members of our Books and Manuscripts team, Darren Winston and Christopher Brink in the doorway. And I just wanted everyone to see their faces. If you have questions about any of the pieces downstairs, in addition to the fellows that you see up here, you can also ask one of them. We also have several other esteemed colleagues in the building and in the room. We have our CEO, Alyssa Quinlan, and our National Head of Trusts and Estates and Private Client Groups, Molly Gran. We have in the building, I don't see her, but Gemma Sudlow, our Managing Director of our New York mission. There she is. We also have our specialists from the New York team. I see Diane Batista in the corner, our senior specialist of SVP of jewelry, who is here in New York. And we have Samantha Minchell, who's a specialist in European and American furniture. And out in the hall, we also have Ben Fisher. We have Annie Wu, head of Chinese, and several other colleagues, in addition to Julia Fitzgerald, our CMO, who you can personally thank her for the beautiful display and including all of the incredible wall text and the posters and all of the marketing that they've done for this. So please stay with us, have another glass of wine, go downstairs again and look at things and ask questions. And this is the beginning of a 6-week journey with us to the auction. So the last question I have for all of you, and apologies to anyone I forgot, because I'm sure I did, because this was totally off the cuff. So how does all of this and your whole history of your careers and what you've been working on even more recently, how does this inform one or two favorite lots from the highlights preview for the auction downstairs? And I'm going to start here this time. Wes, you're not off the hook and waiting for them to go.
Well, I was drawn to, initially I was drawn, oh my God, these are the gloves that were in Lincoln's right pocket in Ford's Theater. And then I started looking at a little more deeply into the collection. I mean, there's some amazing things, but one of the things that really drew my attention was a 2-line note that says, "Mother, please put something in Tad's room, A.L." And then below it, in much bolder, much more vigorous handwriting, is a note from Mary Lincon instructing the superintendent of public buildings to put some boards and planks in Tad's room. Now, you think, oh, that's nothing. Well, but it shows the humanity of Lincon, I think, probably better than anything down there. Lincon and Mary lived a life of tragedy. They had 4 children, one of whom died before they got to the White House. One died in 1863 in the White House. 1862, thank you. I told you I'm not the Lincoln scholar. He died in 1862. Robert Todd Lincoln, the oldest son, had already gone off to college. And the Lincolns were left with their youngest son, Tad. And by all accounts, Tad was a tyrant. And he didn't like to read, didn't want to have anything to do with his tutors. Lincoln supposedly said to his private secretary, John Nicolay, oh, don't let him, he's a rascal. And, we've already raised one rascal, meaning Robert Todd. And, he's got plenty of time to learn. What did he say? Like, basically,
to get pokey.
Yeah, to get boring, basically. So Lincoln was a dad, and he adored his children, and he let them run roughshod over him. And for visitors of the White House, I'm sure they were like appalled. And yet, here's this note: Mother, meaning Mary, put something in Tad's room. We don't know what it was, but boards and planks must have been something. I don't know. Maybe you can shed some light on that.
But it's a great choice. It's a great choice.
And there are so many items related to the family, the many pieces within the sale that get to that aspect of him being a father. It's nice to see that well-rounded aspect of the sale.
As you have to Ken.
So It seems a bit harsh to go to the assassination, but I must say that working with items related to his assassination at the Chicago History Museum, I'm drawn to the pieces here that are connected, including the gloves that you have all seen, as well as a fragment of the shirt that he wore, the flipping of his coat, where you can see the many layers on the interior, suggesting it was a cool day like today, and then the quilting and the connections to the quality of that piece, as well as the cufflink, with each their own story, each and their provenance that is recorded with the pieces. I think tragic, of course, but a really compelling story that hints to the profound nature of this entire collection.
And then, Harold?
Well, I mean, the gloves are astonishing. In the Lincon movie, you have him leaving the gloves on the table in the last scene of the movie because he hated wearing constrictive gloves, but he took them, he wore them, he split them when not these, but when shaking hands. So that's amazing to see. And I saw some of these in the original collection in California 30, 40 years ago. I haven't seen them and on exhibit at the Huntington. I haven't seen them since. That was thrilling. To see the scrapbook page, the Lincoln writing doggerel, Abraham Lincoln is my name, and with this pen I wrote the same. I never remember the third line, blah, 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 and left it here for fools to read. It's amazing. He wrote that as a teenager. But I'm going to talk about one item that speaks to me as a person who was also involved in politics, and as I mentioned, as a political press secretary. The one thing we told our clients, elected leaders, if you want to say something off the record, say it's off the record and then talk. I worked for someone who once said something and then said, by the way, it's off the record. And the AP reporter said, you didn't say it to start, so it's on the record. So my person threatened him with violence. But that was another way.
What?
It's a true story. Lincoln, after losing the 1854/5 Senate campaign, much less famous, much less documented than his public race for the Senate 3 years later against Stephen Douglas, here was just the state legislature meeting with no campaign preceding it to choose a United States senator. That's the way it was until 1912. We didn't vote for senators directly. And he led on something like 15, 16 ballots and then yielded his lead, and then eventually, to stop a Democrat, allowed another former Whig named Lyman Trumbull to be elected. Mary never spoke to his wife again. But here is a letter that was never in the collected works of Lincoln, in which Lincoln talks about his heartbreak at losing, that he's kind of regained his composure now. He's got his equilibrium back. And then he says, well, so-and-so did this, and so-and-so deserted me, and so-and-so aligned with the wrong person, and then Trumbull won, and then we had to stop Madison, Matteson. And then at the very end of the letter, he says, having mentioned so many names specifically, I hope you will keep this confidential. So he did just what people do to make mistakes, but it's the only long letter I know of that indicates Lincoln's frustration and his really work in the legislature. He couldn't vote. He had abandoned a run for the legislature so he didn't have to vote for himself. And it's just politician, the guy who is taking names, holding some grudges, and thinking ahead. But this is a moment in a Senate campaign that no one writes about. They only write about the Lincoln-Douglas debates. And I found that extraordinary, the idea of seeing that and holding that. It wasn't published until the second supplement of the collected works. So it's pretty extraordinary to see.
I thought you were going to mention the letter, and I can't remember. Is a correspondent to Lincoln advising him to not answer any questions. If somebody asks you, like the press asks you, don't, avoid them. Don't. And I was thinking, but he like we still face that today.
Yeah, but you've also got the famous scrap of paper where Lincoln decided to write some semi-ribble lines, but using Pig Latin, I guess. So he said something is bass backwards instead of ass backwards. It's pretty unusual. So anyway, it is like visiting the Chicago History Museum, the Smithsonian, the Library of Congress, all in one evening, and Sancerre. So we went to do that.
Thank you. With that, our party planner, Harold Holzer. So please join us again in the preview. Look at the objects, look at the letters, look at the handwriting, ask your questions. And then on your way out, please also thank Kristen Ryan, who organized this event for us, and Jack and Abby by the door, who took your coats and welcomed you in. And please come back and visit anytime. These pieces will be here in New York through Friday, and then they are going on a whistle-stop tour to Palm Beach, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, and then Chicago. So we hope to see you in all of those locations. Tell all your friends. Thank you.
Can I just say one last thing? I want to single out our team that cataloged this material. It's an unbelievable job that they did. It really, the level of scholarship, and I was reading this in Isla Mirada, Florida, while I was sitting in a lounge chair last week.
We felt bad for you.
The level of scholarship blew me away and made me feel so proud that we have a team of brilliant catalogers who have learned to pull the thread and to track down whatever they can about this material.
So far more than cataloging, that's right.
Can I ask one question about clothing and posture? Does anyone figured out in Lemmithan Marfan syndrome? I guess I have to.
There's really a way he had Marfan syndrome, which has been traceable to both sides of his lineage, which is about a 6 billion to 1 non-possibility. With Marfan's, you lose the agility and the strength in your digits, for example. They become very long and distended, but without strength. On his last trip to the front in April 1865, Lincoln returned on a ship and was entertaining people, reading Shakespeare, music was playing, and he did what he always did when he saw an axe. Do you remember the days in school when it said break glass before using, and no one ever understood what that meant, but there was always an axe there. He took the axe between his two fingers and held it at a right angle. Held it, and slammed it to the ground and said, "Now any of my young friends are welcome to try that," and no one could do it. He could not have had Marfan's and done that.
By your hands, the subject, yes.
Oh, a lot. And he also had some other symptoms like a roving eye, but not Marfan's. I mean, he may have had arteriosclerosis at the end and had lost a lot of weight, but he was much too strong to have been a Marfan.
Thank you all. Be sure to pick up a copy of the book in the hallway and introduce yourself to Dr. Holzer and ask him to sign it for you. Thank you.